The Holy Gospel according to John, the 13th chapter. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in God's own self and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Judeans, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Grace, mercy, and peace to you from the God of all grace and love and mercy. Amen. Yesterday morning, a commercial stopped me in my tracks. Sometimes Dave leaves the news on and I just pass by not really taking notice. But there was a minute-long commercial that made me stop, and I watched the entire thing and then immediately going to discover more about this. It was entitled, "Belonging Begins with Us." I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's only a minute long, but Eric is going to show it right now. Maybe.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. If you could see you through my eyes instead of your ego. I believe you'd be surprised to see that you've been blind. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Yeah, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
So I watched it. I kept going, who has put this together? Why are they showing this? And my curiosity took me to their website. It is put out by the Ad Council that has been in existence here in the U.S. since 1943 or so. And they have had many different ways in which they are trying to fill in or to kind of build up the social fabric of our nation, and whether it be polio vaccines or COVID vaccines, and here it is around building community. Their ad campaign says this: "We've all had moments when we've felt we didn't belong. But for people who move to this country, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We all want to feel safe and included in the community we call home. But today, too many of our neighbors experience exclusion, isolation, harassment, and even violence on the basis of their identity. Belonging Begins with Us is a new campaign with PSAs that empower viewers to foster a more welcoming nation where everyone, regardless of background, feels they belong. Each of us has the power to welcome others into our community." I was touched by this inspiration, so then I investigated the website further. And on the website, there are all of these beautiful black and white photos, and then you click on a photo, and actually, Eric, if you can hover over one of them, it just lights up. So you can see the cross, you can see a picture of a soccer ball, you can see a camera, there's a scarf. You click on it, and there is a 45-second to a minute-long story of someone who tells a story about this object and the meaning of this object. And I found myself taking I listened to 15, 20 of these stories. I almost listened to all of them. And they were simple, but heartfelt, and spoke about the diversity of experiences of those who I call neighbor, perhaps who live here in Renton or in other parts of our nation. Belonging begins with us. And I found myself further thinking, belonging begins, as people of faith, we say, with God. And belonging begins with love. Belonging begins with listening. I found this so inspirational and worthwhile. And throughout the day, I was so excited about the sermon I was feeling called to preach. I had some inspirational stories. I was going to show some of these. And love one another, Jesus said. Love one another. It sounds so easy. I think I had a few little stars, on the paper that I wrote out. And then I watched the 30-minute press conference with the mayor of Buffalo, New York. I watched the whole thing. And I heard the horrific details of the young 18-year-old white supremacist who drove 3 hours away from home to enter into a grocery store in full fatigues and to terrorize Black residents of that neighborhood. And I found myself angry, feeling arrested, feeling like I've preached this sermon before, also feeling like Jesus' words of love one another, they feel empty sometimes when we are surrounded and we watch the violence that's going on in the world, when it's swirling around us. Love one another in these cute little 45 seconds. They're nice. But I'm longing for transformation. I'm longing for 18-year-old kids to know that it is not okay to live stream the murder of innocent people. I am longing for an eradication of white supremacy and white nationalism that is wreaking havoc and has wreaked havoc since the founding of our nation. So I had to throw out my whole dang sermon and start over. And I have to tell you, it's been hard for me to kind of put together a beautiful red thread. As a preacher, often we want to have like a really great story. We want to thread it through. We want to take you on a journey with us and then give you a punchline at the end, and you are ready to go out and serve God and love all people, and you are just raring to go. Ugh. It hasn't been that easy today, folks. I don't have a fancy little catchphrase to just inspire you out the door. Instead, I have Jesus ringing in my ear, love one another. Love one another as I have loved you. And I think, Jesus, I think that your followers have kind of added a few things to it. It's more like we have said, love one another when they look like you. Or love one another when you feel like it. Or love one another when it's easy. Love one another and preach on it when you don't have to talk about white supremacy. Jonathan Swift in 1711 wrote this: "We have just enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another." A colleague of mine who leads a predominantly Black church sings a song with their community called "I Need You to Survive." We have never sung that at St. Matthew's. They sing it after every violent murder or racialized violence that their community experiences. And here are the lyrics. I need you, you need me. We're all part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is his will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. Everybody, look at somebody and tell them, I need you to survive. And it goes on. I pray for you, you pray for me. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. This is a very different hymn, one that has never had to be sung in a predominantly white church. And I think of Black grandmas who are singing this song into the faces of their grandchildren. I think of mamas who belt this out and sing it for their babies. And so I am convicted today and reminded that as a community of faith, we have to continue to call out evil for what evil is. And the sin of this violence is not of God. And one of the lies of whiteness or white supremacy is that we just want to move on really quickly. We just want to move on to the next news. We don't want to dwell in the pain and the horror. But as people of faith, I think this is what it means to love. It's to stop and listen to people's stories, to fully let the impact of the violence break our hearts open so much so that we can't go through life the same way. We can't watch the news, we cannot read the Bible the same way. We're called to love with a love that is self-giving and fully about the liberation and the human flourishing of all people. The human flourishing of all people. Yesterday, I had the car, which you might think you had the car. Well, Dave and I, for the last 6 months, have been sharing our Prius. A lot of factors, but one of the main ones is cars are 25 to 30% more expensive these days, and we are just waiting for the car, for it to adjust so we can buy a used vehicle. So I had the car yesterday, and I had 5 errands that I needed to do. And one of the errands I did was I had to hop by DK Market to just get some things that I often get there. And as I was pulling out, there was a mama who had a hijab on with a young son. And she was probably 10 years younger than me. And our eyes locked. And I remember thinking, should I pull over? What is her story? Who is her family? Did her child eat today? And then I kept driving. I went home and I could still see her eyes. I could still see her brow kind of furrowed. And I found myself once again confronted with Jesus' words, "Love one another as I have loved you." This morning I told Dave, I don't want to play church. Like, as a leader, I want us to kind of start to question and wonder, what does it mean to be church? Not play church, just go through the motions, make all the hymns look nice, make the bulletins look nice, but what does it mean to be church? Like to be on the street, to pull over by the side of the road and ask the woman, what is your story and can I go get you some groceries? What does it mean to be the church? The hands, the feet, the heart of Jesus. What does it mean to be the church in the face of hatred that is going on? Because it's very easy to come here and feel very comfortable. It's very easy for me to drive home and just watch the news and everything stays far away from my own sanctuary of a home. But when Jesus said, love one another, I don't think it's about nicety, and I don't think it's about tolerance. I think it is about a radical, inside-out way in which we live in solidarity with all of God's beloved people. We have such a healthy curiosity. We cannot help but get to know people, to know their stories, to fall in love with who they are as God's own. And it does not matter the language they speak, the color of their skin, where they live, how much money they have in the bank. They are beloved of God, and God gives us those eyes to see and to love. We're going to do a little bit of investigation. I'm talking a little longer than I realized, but sometimes that's what the Spirit does. You have, hopefully, as you came in, our welcome statement that we have had for the last 5 years. And I grabbed it. Nope, I didn't. Libby is passing them out right now. This statement has been shaping us and will continue to shape us as a community, and we are going to be adding 2 new parts to it, and they're in the purple: gender expressions and racial equality. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to invite you to stand up, go and find someone that you have not had a conversation with yet today, and share what is the one thing that is the most convicting, or the thing that perhaps you feel St. Matthew's needs to live into today. St. Matthew's is a passionate, imperfect community of Christ. We boldly affirm people of all cultures, ages, abilities, stories, experiences, skin tones, sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. We trust in the ridiculous love of God that shows no partiality. When our unique identities are used to divide or hurt us, we are committed to reconciliation and healing so that justice, racial equity, grace, and inclusion continue to be our way of life. So you have 2 minutes, 21 seconds. I invite you to stand up, and what is the most sticky part of our welcome statement today for you? Ready, go, get up, move, talk, make it happen. Beloved of God, we have a lot to talk about, and so after worship, I invite you to continue these conversations. At 11:10, we'll be meeting in the sanctuary. The council will be inviting people to continue to talk about our welcome statement. But I'm curious, what are just a few people, what was sticky to you this morning of our welcome statement? Racial equity came forward for you. Yeah, thank you so much, Courtney. For those who are online, Courtney shared just briefly that kind of dismantling the narrative of white Christians, kind of really directing some of the white supremacy that's been a part of our nation. And it takes one church at a time. Thank you. Yeah, Diana. Oh, great. Tell me what's hard. That's great, too. So take... Okay. Absolutely. So Diana lifted up that they looked at the welcome statement and said, this is a great statement to say in here, but it's really hard to live it out when we walk outside of these doors. And so what does that look like, and how do we do that? Thank you so much. However you interacted with it, I think we want to wrestle with it. How does it transform us? How does it break our hearts? How does it move us into action to not just play church, but be the church? Yeah, Libby. Yeah, no, thank you. Libby, I appreciate that so much. And for those who are home, Libby lifted up the vulnerability of going out and lifting this up, but also in her conversation with Jill, how many times have people come and they've experienced St. Matthew's, have they experienced welcome and it felt included, and kind of really lifting up the word inclusion and how is that lived out within our walls. So I did not at all sum it up as beautifully as you shared it. So next service, I'm going to have a microphone out there so I don't have to try to repeat. I'm learning. Yeah, Barb. So there's a feeling of hopelessness. Like, so we have this beautiful statement, or we have these values that are grounding us, but then we can feel hopeless as to how do we move forward and impact change. Absolutely. Well, I think this is the crossroads that we are at a church, that we continue to ask the question, what does it mean to be church, Christ church, with this expansive call of love that breaks down barriers, that continues to make the table broader and bigger, and where every voice matters. And belonging begins with God. Belonging begins with us. Belonging begins with love. Love one another.